Arizona farmers still have a legal contract for subsidized Colorado River water through the year 2030. But the water itself vanished in 2022, nearly a decade early. Not the paperwork, not the signatures, the actual water. That is the expiration paradox. A resource can fail before the contract attached to it expires. And when that happens, the damage does not stop at the farm gate. Land values shift, mortgages wobble, water rights get repriced. Banks suddenly discover that their safe collateral depends on a river, an aquifer, or a regulator's deadline. And none of those things care about a 30-year loan. The 2004 Water Settlements Act gave Central Arizona farmers a dedicated pool of Colorado River supply through the Central Arizona Project Canal System. Deliveries were supposed to run in steps, 400,000 acre-feet annually from 2004 through 2016, 300,000 from 2017 to 2023, and 225,000 from 2024 to 2030. The promise depended on one assumption: the river would keep flowing long enough to honor the calendar. Then, the Bureau of Reclamation declared a Tier 1 shortage for the 2022 water year after Lake Mead fell below 1,075 feet. Every drop of the agricultural pool disappeared overnight. The right to buy water through 2030 still existed. The canal did not care. That matters because farm finance has treated land and water as permanent. Banks make 20 to 30-year mortgages against farmland because water rights are usually treated as non-depreciating collateral. Terminal value, the projected resale price at the end of a loan, often represents more than half of an operation's worth. Early effective expiration breaks that model. A drought can erase surface deliveries, or a regulator can order a groundwater basin to reach sustainability. And the land's financial usefulness changes immediately. Capitalization rates expand, present values fall, amortization schedules stop matching the resource life, and default probability rises as substitute water gets more expensive. California's southern San Joaquin Valley already shows the repricing. Properties without surface water access, known locally as white lands, carry steep discounts. Almond orchards on the restricted west side now trade between $8,200 and $12,000 per acre, because buyers price in future water costs from day one. Walnut orchards in water-restricted zones often sell for open land value. Parcels with legally adjudicated, secure water rights move the other way. Formal adjudication alone has been linked to an average $381 per acre increase, because it gives buyers legal certainty. Arizona's trap began long before the 2004 settlement. Before the mid-20th century, farms relied on local diversions and shallow wells. Then, the high-speed centrifugal turbine pump opened deep fossil aquifers accumulated over millennia, and by the 1970s, farms and cities were pumping faster than nature could recharge. The federal government authorized the Central Arizona Project in 1968, a 336-mile canal to move Colorado River water inland. Congress added a condition: Arizona had to curb aquifer depletion first. That pressure produced the 1980 Groundwater Management Act, which created active management areas, required safe yield by 2025, and forced new development to prove a 100-year assured water supply. The plan was to move farmers from wells to cap water, but the economics turned against them. Cap water started flowing in 1985, and irrigation districts had to build lateral networks. Central Arizona districts borrowed over $228 million from the federal government, plus $91 million from private lenders. then levied property taxes of roughly $85 per acre to service the debt. Farmers discovered cap water cost more than pumping groundwater. Cotton prices crashed, whitefly infestations hit yields, and credit tightened. Cap deliveries fell from 745,000 acre-feet in 1990 to 420,000 in 1991. By 1992, less than half the eligible acreage still carried an active crop. Internal Bureau of Reclamation memoranda warned that enforcing take-or-pay provisions would push the vast majority of Arizona irrigation districts into immediate bankruptcy. A decade of conflict produced the 2004 Arizona Water Settlements Act. Farmers relinquished their long-term percentage-based cap entitlements and received full federal debt relief. The present value of remaining obligations was approximately $52.8 million. Irrigation districts covered roughly 13%. State parties absorbed 63% through municipal tax and ratepayers, and the federal government forgave the remaining 24%. The surrendered entitlements freed 293,795 acre-feet inside cap. 197,500 acre-feet went to the Secretary of the Interior for Indian uses, and 96,295 went to municipal and industrial reallocation. 653,500 acre-feet per year went to the Gila River Indian Community, one of the largest tribal water settlements in American history. Congress authorized up to $53 million for an operational trust fund. Farmers received the agricultural settlement pool instead. Subsidized, energy-only rate water, shrinking over time, with a hard expiration in 2030. Here was the flaw. The ag pool sat at the lowest priority tier in CAP, below municipal and industrial, below Indian priority, and below the reallocated NIA pool. Designers used 20th century runoff data and assumed the pool would physically exist through 2030. The 2019 Drought Contingency Plan destroyed that assumption. When Lake Mead fell below 1,075 feet, Arizona lost 512,000 acre-feet, roughly 30% of its normal cap supply. Because the lowest tiers are cut first, the ag pool was wiped out. A University of Arizona analysis estimated that cutting 300,000 acre-feet from these deliveries would cause direct farm sale losses between $63 and $66 million, excluding multiplier effects. Mitigation bought time, not permanence. The Arizona Water Banking Authority exchanged 43,225 acre-feet of long-term storage credits. Tucson pledged to store up to 35,000 acre-feet per year at groundwater savings facilities in the Pinal Active Management Area. The Gila River Indian Community proposed creating at least 200,000 acre-feet of intentionally created surplus to remain in Lake Mead. Agriculture received 105,000 acre-feet per year from 2020 to 2022. Then zero wet water mitigation from 2023 to 2025. By 2026, all systemic mitigation permanently ends for every user in the system. Groundwater was supposed to catch the fall, so the state funded new wells through the Pinal Groundwater Infrastructure Fund. $5 million came from the Central Arizona Water Conservation District, and $9 million went into the Temporary Groundwater and Irrigation Efficiency Projects Fund. Then, ADWR released its 2019 Pinal AMA groundwater model, and the results flattened those plans. Unmet groundwater demand exceeded 8.1 million acre-feet over a 100-year projection period. ADWR said it would no longer approve new assured water supply applications based on native groundwater in the Pinal model domain. Agency leadership put it bluntly. The days of utilizing native groundwater for development in Pinal are over. It is done. That is the trap closing from both sides. The 2004 settlement assumed groundwater would be the safety net after 2030. The drought contingency plan stripped surface water away early. Then the state helped fund wells, just as its own model declared the groundwater backup insolvent. Agriculture consumes approximately 70% of Arizona water, and in Pinal County, groundwater usage maximization accelerated up to a full decade earlier than expected. These aquifers hold mostly fossil water, and each deeper foot requires exponentially more energy to pump. Soil compaction and subsidence do not reverse. Maricopa County has subsided by more than 18 feet since the early 20th century, and NASA Landsat data found the basin lost roughly 27.8 million acre-feet of groundwater between 2002 and 2024. That is about Lake Mead's entire maximum storage capacity. Projections showed Pinal farmers fallowing up to 40% of their land by 2026. By 2014, Pinal and Maricopa counties ranked in the top 1% of U.S. counties for cattle inventory, with approximately 220,000 beef cattle, $348 million in direct sales, and 90,000 dairy cows. As water and local feed vanished, dairy left. Milk production rose 10.6% in the Texas Panhandle, 18.64% in Kansas, and 10.64% in South Dakota. Western dairy contracted, while regions with reliable supply, cheaper feed, and new multi-billion-dollar processing infrastructure absorbed the herds. California is running the same movie with a longer clock. SGMA, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act passed in 2014, gives high-priority basins until 2040 to reach balance, a 26-year runway. But it also requires agencies to prevent undesirable results, meaning harms like domestic well failures and subsidence by 2020 or 2022, depending on the basin. In the Turlock subbasin, the eastern cap is 1.6 acre-feet of groundwater per acre, with fees for excess use. Almond orchards need a minimum of 3 to 4 acre-feet to survive and produce commercially. Those numbers cannot both be true for the same land. Across the San Joaquin Valley, 500,000 acres, roughly 10% of the irrigated footprint, may leave production, potentially eliminating $7 billion in annual farm revenue and 42,000 jobs. Fallowing creates health risk. Remote sensing shows 88% of anthropogenic dust events in California originate from fallowed agricultural land, exposing 177,000 residents to severe respiratory illness, including valley fever. In December 1977, the Great Bakersfield dust storm sent gusts reaching 192 miles per hour across the southern San Joaquin Valley, killing at least 5 people and causing $40 million in damage. Farmers are adapting. New almond plantings are down 68% since 2022, and non-bearing almond acreage fell from an annual average of 330,000 acres to 105,000. Avocado growers use stumping, cutting canopies to save water, while other mature orchards are bulldozed. In Tulare County, Caponero Creek is converting 500 acres of former dairy farmland to native habitat with saltbush and bladderpod for the San Joaquin kit fox and blunt-nosed leopard lizard. For lenders, the water story becomes a credit story. The debt service coverage ratio measures whether net farm income covers annual debt obligations. Below 1 means the farm cannot pay without selling assets or raising outside capital. Early expiration compresses income through fallowing and lower yield substitutions, while raising costs through extraction taxes, deeper pumping, and open market water purchases. The risk becomes systemic because loan books concentrate inside specific hydrological basins. One curtailment can stress an entire regional portfolio. Banks now use geospatial water security platforms and parcel-by-parcel analysis to reject properties headed for stranded asset status. Risk frameworks show sudden curtailments can push agricultural companies from investment grade to speculative grade overnight. The Klamath River Basin showed how fast values can collapse. When federal reclamation water was redirected to endangered species protection, irrigated farmland valued between $2,200 and $2,800 per acre dropped to between $150 and $250 per acre in one growing season. Lenders stopped new orchard loans and prematurely called existing long-term mortgages. Chapter 12 bankruptcies, designed for family farmers and ranchers, surged from a record low of 139 in 2023 as pressure intensified. Consolidation followed. Most U.S. producers operate on 50 acres or less, yet just 5% of landowners own half the state's cropland. California transaction data from 2003 to 2017 shows individual acquisitions falling by half, while LLC purchases climbed to 1/3 of overlying acres. Corporate buyers drill wells 77 to 81 feet deeper than the individual farmers they displaced. This is not only American. Indonesia's palm oil industry depends on hot guna usaha leases, state concessions usually issued for 25 to 35 years. Financial models treated renewal as routine, until environmental scrutiny and agrarian reform changed the risk. If an HGU expires or is revoked for compliance failures, the land reverts entirely to the state. Supply chain investigations found one company's renewal slashed from 4,847 hectares to just 2,002, triggering immediate suspension from major global supply chains. Renewals now mandate community-owned plasma plantations, covering at least 20% of the concession area, depressing net present value and raising creditor risk premiums. Energy shows the same contract versus reality failure. In the 1980s, interstate gas pipelines signed decade-long take-or-pay contracts with fixed scarcity prices. Deregulation opened access, a supply glut arrived, and liabilities hit $5.7 billion. Later, California's deregulated electricity market barred long-term utility contracts and forced buying through spot markets. Drought reduced hydropower, transmission bottlenecks appeared, wholesale prices exploded. Pacific Gas and Electric filed for bankruptcy, and the state signed inflated emergency contracts. Agriculture policy does the same. U.S. farm bills are temporary 5-year authorizations that revert to permanent law from 1938 and 1949 when they expire. The 1996 Freedom to Farm Act tried to phase out subsidies by 2002, but the Asian financial crisis in 1997 and 1998 crashed demand, so emergency bailouts began in 1998. The EU dairy quota expiration in 2015 repeated the pattern. Herds expanded, the Russian embargo and slowing Chinese imports hit demand, prices crashed, and emergency intervention buying returned with hundreds of millions of euros. Arizona is now writing the agricultural exit into law. Senate Bill 1611, signed in 2025, lets landowners in the Phoenix and Pinal active management areas permanently surrender irrigation grandfathered rights for groundwater savings credits. Residential development uses roughly 1 to 1.5 acre-feet per acre, while heavy agriculture draws 4 to 6. Developers buy the credits as proof of a 100-year water supply. Over 20,000 acres of prime farmland in Pinal County's Coolidge and Eloy areas have become solar installations. The U.S. Energy Information Administration projects a 50% increase in nationwide electricity demand by 2050, and American Farmland Trust estimates utility-scale solar could cover roughly 2.5 million acres nationwide by 2040. With 83% on current farmland and ranch lands. University of Arizona agrivoltaics research grows crops under solar panels, where shade reduces soil moisture evaporation and protects heat-sensitive herbs and leafy greens. But agrivoltaics cannot replace the vast cotton and alfalfa acreage that once defined the region. The 2023 Tapped Out decision rejected ADWR's AMA-wide unmet demand rule on procedural grounds because the agency had not completed formal rulemaking. The injunction forced ADWR to resume applications under prior, less restrictive criteria, opening a permitting window while the agency goes through lengthy rulemaking. Localized heavy pumping continues. From here, 4 paths are possible. In an orderly transition, regulators give clear guidance, pumping cuts phase in over 10 to 20 years, and farmers use the 25-year biological life cycle of orchards to shift into annual crops or solar leases. In a political extension, enforcement delays keep values stable, permanent crops keep expanding, 30-year mortgages keep getting written, and the eventual crash becomes worse because the system is over-leveraged. Other paths are harsher. In abrupt tightening, a severe multi-year drought or judicial ruling eliminates rights without warning. Land values collapse, thousands of farms default, irrigation districts default on revenue bonds, and central bank or federal bailout interventions become necessary. The most probable path is piecemeal local adaptation, like California's fragmented SGMA rollout. Hundreds of agencies set different rules across adjacent boundaries, while some districts create water markets that turn saved allocations into a new asset. Central bank and Network for Greening the Financial System frameworks treat these paths as different stress scenarios. But the core lesson is the same. Assumed permanence is ending. Land and the resources needed to farm it can no longer sit on a balance sheet as static, non-depreciating collateral. Underwriting has to move from historical yields to forward-looking geospatial stress tests that account for regulatory timelines, local water budgets, and stranded asset risk. Producers, irrigation districts, and lenders on the wrong side of repricing will absorb collapsed equity, stranded infrastructure, and systemic credit downgrades. Well-capitalized entities with senior water rights and access to functioning water markets will consolidate distressed land. They will not just survive the expiration paradox. They will decide who farms the future.